when renovation work was being carried out at the Kings Tavern in Natchez, Mississippi. The gruesome discovery of 3 bodies found buried behind a chimney started the paranormal activity that continues to this day. Who were the 3 people found, and what was their tragic story that led them to be hidden away for decades? So with that in mind, let's look at the King's Tavern's dark history, a place filled with tales of adultery, greed and murder. The King's Tavern is more than 240 years old, built in the late 1700s, making it the oldest structure in the old river port city of Natchez. In 1789, a New Yorker named Richard King decided to move his family to Natchez and start afresh, buying the blockhouse, which he decided to open as a tavern, inn, and a place for the town's mail to be dropped off and picked up. With so much of the town's life circling the property, the King family became very popular in the community. People would socialise over a drink, chat while collecting their mail, and visitors would stay at the inn, bringing in plenty of money. But with the good comes the bad, as not all customers were people you wanted around, especially as they liked to prey on the travellers and boatmen. You see, highwaymen would rob people as they travelled along the dark road of the Natchez Trace pathway, often murdering their victims. The most infamous of these people, and thought to be America's first serial killers, were the Harp brothers. The brothers were known to be sadistic, enjoying the thrill of the kill, often using torture and mutilation before finally ending the life of the poor man, woman or child. After they'd gained enough money from their wicked deeds, they'd return to town and spend it all on drink and gambling. I will give you an example of how nasty these men were, and brace yourself, it's pretty upsetting to say the least. One evening, one of the brothers, known as Big Harp, was drinking alone at the inn when the sound of a baby crying could be heard coming from a room in the attic. Well, Big Harp didn't like the screaming of the child, so staggered upstairs and barged into the room, grabbing the young child from its mother and swinging it as hard as he could against a brick wall, killing it. After this horrific act, he went back downstairs and continued drinking as if nothing had happened. But while the Hart brothers may have been people you didn't want around, they were the sort of men that would do dirty work for you, for the right price, of course. Due to his newfound popularity in the community, it seems that Richard King thought he could do whatever he wanted, with whomever he wanted. So when a young 16-year-old girl named Madeline started work at the King's Tavern as a server, it didn't take long for Richard to seduce the girl and start a pretty steamy affair, which his wife found out about. Mrs. King was furious at her husband's betrayal and decided to get rid of Madeline for good. Many believe that she either paid the Harp brothers or someone of their ilk to kill the young girl, or maybe she did the deed herself. Either way, Madeline was stabbed to death and then buried behind the chimney in the main room away from prying eyes. It kind of gives you a feel for the type of activity that took place back then. You needed to have eyes in the back of your head just to get out alive. Even one of the Harp brothers finally met his end by his own kind, as he was murdered and beheaded with his head displayed for all to see as a warning. But all things must come to an end, and with the success of the steamboats, which could go up and down the rivers, people didn't need to travel along the deadly Natchez Trace pathway anymore, or need the services of the tavern as much as they used to. So Richard made the decision to sell the property in 1817, and it stayed a private home for about 150 years. But it was while renovations were taking place, 3 mummified bodies were unearthed, one being a woman and the other 2 being men. One of the bodies is believed to have been Madeline, and the dual dagger murder weapon was found behind another fireplace. But who were the other 2 men? Many think they might be murder victims of the Harp brothers, as if they did indeed carry out a favour for Mrs. King, maybe they figured hiding 2 more bodies was the least she could do. The bodies of the 3 victims were properly buried after their discovery, but it seems the disruption of the original resting place awakened their spirits, with not all of them said to be happy. In fact, one is downright evil. At first, people began to notice strange things like heat emitting from the fireplace even though nothing had been burning, and shadowy figures passing through the stairway at all hours of the day and night. You can imagine how unsettling this must have been, but that's nothing compared to what was to come. Madeline met her end in a vicious way, and while still very young, but it seems that her ghost is quite playful and loves to play jokes on staff and visitors. She will pour water from the ceiling onto the floor or people below, as well as knocking jars off shelves to make people jump in shock. But her hauntings go even further. Doors which are difficult to open will suddenly open smoothly by themselves, and when a member of staff calls out her name, the door will slam shut again. She also likes to turn lights and faucets on and then off. The creepiest thing, though, is when staff are cleaning up for the night and mop the floor. You see, Madeline will walk across the floor in her bare feet, leaving the footprints for all to see, and some members of staff have seen the prints walking towards them. If you decided to stay in one of the bedrooms, the sighting of a young woman dressed in old-fashioned clothing has been reported, seen reflected in windows and mirrors. Also, many say that she will lie on their beds, and when they approach, you can see the outline of her body and the heat from where she lay. Now, while Madeline is a playful spirit, the other strong entity said to haunt the King's Tavern is not so nice, and thought to be one of the men that was murdered in the chimney, or maybe even Wiley Harp. Staff at the tavern feel that the ghost of the man is evil and angry over the way he was killed. He is said to wear a dark jacket, pants and black tie string, along with a top hat. People describe a tightness in their necks and shoulders, like they're being strangled, as well as a pressure on their chests. Could these be some of the symptoms experienced at the time of his death? This spirit will also violently throw dishes around and suddenly appear behind people wanting to take their pictures near the fireplace where the bodies were found. But don't think you're safe if you stay away from the downstairs portion of the property with this ghost, as many visitors have also expressed alarm at seeing his reflection snarling at them from the mirror in their room, and just as quickly vanishing again. Disturbingly, the third spirit resides in the attic area, where the sound of a child crying can be heard echoing throughout the building. That would be really upsetting to hear, especially as we all now know how the child met its end. The King's Tavern has been closed for a while at the time of this recording, while new owners renovate and make it ready for business again. But if you get a chance to visit the location, it is highly recommended that you do. With the strong history attached to the place and the old world design of the architecture, it really is like stepping back in time without the worry of highwaymen robbing you blind. As always, until next time, dissectors, stay safe out there.